Welcome to the lecture series on vitamins and nutrition. Today we are going to continue with folic acid, what we have seen earlier. Today we are going to discuss on the metabolic role, what we have discussed earlier. We are going to continue a little bit more on that, and primarily we are going to look at the aspect of various compounds that can inhibit folic acid metabolism and how these compounds play an essential role in various therapeutic options available in cancer chemotherapy. So, we are going to look at how people or patients who are on this category of drugs can be actually dietarily supplemented to avoid all the deficiency conditions associated with folic acid. And in addition to that, we are going to look at how folic acid deficiency can have an impact on various conditions connected with metabolic insufficiency. And we are going to also look at the peculiar variety of anemia concerned with folic acid deficiency. So, we will start with this particular compound. This particular compound is called aminopterin. Okay. So, if you look at this compound, you would be very much surprised. So, aminopterin resembles folic acid. So, it is a fraudulent molecule. So, for all the enzymes, tetrahydrofolate, dihydrofolate, the activation enzymes and the synthase enzymes concerned with the folic acid pathway would take up this particular compound thinking it to be the folic acid, and would be now as a competitive inhibitor, the function would be lost. So, aminopterin is supposed to be the first folate synthase inhibitor. Okay. So, this is an enzyme which is very essential in the pathway of folic acid, and how folic acid activation, dihydrofolate reductase and tetrahydrofolate reductase in a sequential manner activates folic acid. In fact, aminopterin was synthesized looking into the structure of folic acid as an important compound, and how this as a fraudulent molecule would inhibit the dihydrofolate reductase. So, folic acid inhibition, especially folic acid activation being inhibited by this particular compound. So, the enzyme would preferentially take this particular metabolite thinking it to be folic acid, and its role in activating folic acid would now be put to halt. Now, there is one more compound, what we call it like pemetrexed. Pemetrexed is basically an anti-cancer drug. It is used in the treatment of mesothelioma and non-small cell lung cancer. So, this category of compound is basically again a fraudulent derivative of folic acid. So, if you look at it, you have a indole compound. Actually, here you have the core structure, you have a pyrimidine ring, and then you have a pyrazole ring, and then there is a bridge, then you have the aryl moiety, and then you have the glutamate. So, this heterocyclic ring resembles the folic acid, as you see over there, resembles the pteridine link, but actually it is not a pteridine link, it resembles the pteridine link. So, that way this again a compound will inhibit the essential enzymes involved in the folic acid activation. So, in lung cancers, if you recollect, I have been telling you that fast growing cells, epithelial cells, RBCs, hematopoietic cells, they require more doses of folic acid. So, this particular compound will act like an anti-metabolite, because all the anti-metabolite category of compounds primarily focus on folate metabolism, folic acid metabolism. So, this is a well known anti-cancer drug used for non-small cell lung cancer and mesothelioma conditions. Okay. And this drug is still available in therapy, and to overcome the folic acid deficiency, the patients need to be supplemented directly with folic acid, because these cancer cells predominantly take this particular compound, and taking this would deprive the cells in utilization of folic acid, and thereby the cells will perish. Here we have one more compound, methotrexate. Methotrexate is an inhibitor of tetrahydrofolate dehydrogenase or reductase. So, it is a 65 kilodalton NADPH dependent enzyme. So, that will reduce folic acid from dihydrofolate to tetrahydrofolate. Okay, so, you have this particular enzyme is inhibited by methotrexate. So, methotrexate is a very good drug. In fact, it is a drug of choice for psoriasis where there is excessive proliferation of epithelial cells. So, methotrexate, like your pemetrexate, is also the same mechanism in which methotrexate would work, and here we have aminopterin. So, these are all like different generations of compounds. So, aminopterin as it's been replaced, or rather being more popularly prescribed by methotrexate and by pemetrexate, but methotrexate has even more a wider application, and all fast growing cells would be inhibited. So, patients might suffer from gastrointestinal disorder, they could develop ulcer, but this drug is used in the treatment of leukemia, and not only leukemia and also for psoriasis, and for maintenance of psoriasis this drug is given. So, it is an antimetabolite which has a wider application, which this drug was actually developed in the leader laboratories in the team under Yellapragada Subbarao, including the discovery of aminopterin is also associated with that. So, one shoot of scientists were working on PABA inhibitors. Okay, here we have the para-aminobenzoic acid. So, that gave rise to sulfonamides, which we have already seen in earlier sessions. So, our discussion will center around direct inhibitor of tetrahydrofolate dehydrogenase. So, you see there as you look at, so we will zoom and we will look into different pathways concerned over there. So, this would be a recap of how the relationship of folic acid with vitamin B12. So, we are going to see about vitamin B12 shortly in the coming sessions. Before we do that, we need to know how vitamin B12 and how folic acid are closely related. In fact, it is called the methyl folate trap, it is the basis of methyl folate trap. So, here we have the relationship with vitamin B12 and the basis of the methyl folate trap. Here we find how folate accumulates as 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate when vitamin B12 is not available. So, you see vitamin B12 deficiency is so closely linked with folic acid metabolism. So, if folic acid is not available, you find accumulation of 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate. So, you see there folic acid getting converted to dihydrofolic acid. So, this is the pathway we have been seeing till now. Then you have the tetrahydrofolate. So, you see this tetrahydrofolate, here you find a formimino transferase, where you have the compound getting converted to one more activated compound. Okay, so, you see there in every stage you have a variation happening over there. So, you see over there this particular compound being the central piece of a variety of metabolic functions that go around this. So, you see there how this tetrahydrofolate reductase plays an essential role in the purine synthesis. So, you see there 10-formoyl tetrahydrofolate synthase. Okay, so, this acts like, and there is one more enzyme, we have 5,10-methenyl tetrahydrofolate cyclohydroxylase. Okay, so, you see there is a kind of a rapid back and forth reaction, and as you go on this end you find the dihydrofolate basically gets converted into 5,10-methyl methylene tetrahydrofolate. So, you see there this reaction basically you have a dump getting converted to DMP, thymidylate synthesis. So, thymidylate synthesis is again a key when you are looking at the nucleic acid metabolism. So, here we have again this reaction where a serine to glycine. So, you have serine hydroxymethyl transferase giving rise to 5,10-methylene 5-hydro tetrahydrofolate. So, this particular enzyme basically kickstarts one more set of reactions as you see over there. where you have methionine synthase, the methyl synthase getting converted or being coupled with the reaction of homocysteine. Okay, so then you have the transferase adenosine getting converted to adenosine methionine. So you see there the reaction proceeds further, and here you have cystathionin and finally cysteine. So this is the series of reactions, and all these reactions are interlinked. That is a surprising part of it. So any deficiency in vitamin B12 would be reflected directly as a methyl folate trap mechanism. So we are going to look at these various compounds, whatever it has been mentioned in the previous slide. So the legend for it is mentioned over there. So deoxythymidine monophosphate, that is what we saw over there as the compound in the thymidylate mechanism. So if you look at over there in the thymidylate mechanism, how they play an essential role. So here we have the deoxyuridine monophosphate. So here you have again the deoxyuridine monophosphate getting converted to thymidine monophosphate, and then you have the other compounds, glutamic acid, homocysteine, histidine. So you see that homocysteine, histidine, where you find this in this network of reactions. So here you have the histidine catabolism. So you see how histidine catabolism is closely linked, and also we have the homocysteine and the cysteine pathway mentioned over here with a single C carbon metabolism. So you see there at every stage, as the legend corresponds, you have let us say the thymidine pathway, then you have the glutamic acid pathway, then the homocysteine, then you have the serine, and then you have all the series of amino acids which act as a source and which is part of the amino acid metabolism sequence. Now we are going to look at vitamin folic acid deficiency. So as I mentioned here, so folic acid deficiency can happen in variety of ways. So it could be people not taking sufficient dietary sources of folic acid, that can give rise to deficiency, or people might have problem in the absorption of folic acid in the jejunum, or people might suffer from chronic alcoholism, as we have seen earlier how that directly affects liver function, not only liver function, even the enzymatic role that is involved in folic acid activation. So chronic alcoholics have a problem maintaining sufficient therapeutic range folic acid in circulation in spite of taking a proper diet. So the primary thing is lack in diet. So this could be like perfectly supplemented by providing the right choice of folic acid source available for the people, and this again could sometimes be of genetic origin, where the carrier proteins of folic acid are not present, or probably as it goes into the metabolic role, there could be some key enzymes involved that can be mutated, and that could result in problems of absorption of folic acid across the gastrointestinal tract. Then it could be also certain therapy which involves, let us say the person is taking methotrexate, the person is taking the anti-cancer drugs which are anti-metabolites in the folic acid pathway. So this might again compete with the normal folic acid requirement in our body. So you see dietary deficiency, habits that can have an impairment in folic acid metabolism, then problems with absorption of folic acid, might be everything right, diet is right, but still they could develop. And then here we have a potential threat of taking certain medications which are fundamentally targeting folic acid metabolism. So invariably they would be antagonists for folic acid. So that could also make people run deficiency in folic acid. Now how do you identify? So as you see over there, so here you have chelosis like symptoms, there will be blistering in the tongue, there will be mouth sores. So, if people would show these primary symptoms, very preliminary symptoms, immediately there should be an alert of folic acid deficiency or pyridoxine deficiency or riboflavin deficiency or vitamin B12. So, most probably folic acid and riboflavin deficiency will give rise to this symptom of mouth sore or inflammation in the buccal cavity, in the tongue and in the lips. So, these are all fast growing epithelial cells. They immediately show deficiency conditions, lack of proliferation and injury. So, that is an indication that we need to supplement the diet with B9 vitamin folic acid. Now, you see, little elaborate. So, as I mentioned, the decreased intake, malabsorption. Malabsorption can also be attributed, apart from inherited diseases of enzymes and co-transport mechanisms being affected. You could also have a simple celiac disease, which is basically an allergic condition where the brush border enzymes are affected, and decreased intake can be like infants not taking sufficient food, elderly, their intake of food has come down. So, the amount of nutrients that they could really depend on that goes inside the system in a normal diet would suffer to a greater extent. So, you see drug inhibition, 5-fluorouracil, okay, trimethoprim and sulfamethoxazole, then you have methotrexate, then you have phenytoin, okay. So, oral contraceptive pills. So, these are all some of the, so the first one is an anti-cancer drug and this one is a I would say antibiotic acting on the folate pathway, then again an anti-metabolite which is an anti-cancer drug. Phenytoin is an I would say epileptic drug used in the treatment of epilepsy. So, these drugs also cause a non-specific inhibition of folic acid metabolic pathway that can give rise to deficiency in folic acid, and we have seen already how alcoholism and hormonal pills, oral contraceptive pills can also have an impact in folic acid metabolism. Then there could be completely a different dimension to folic acid deficiency, where in spite of normal intake, people might also have problems in using folic acid to a greater extent. Let us say in pregnancy and lactation, we have seen already. So, the normal requirement of folic acid doubles or triples. So, if you are not going to supplement with folic acid to the growing demands, then obviously there would be deficiency condition. Then you have malignancy, because cells are proliferating to a very high extent. So, they might traffic the essential folic acid needed for normal cells to be made available for fast growing cancer cells. So, that can also apparently create folic acid deficiency. Then obviously hemolytic anemia. Hemolytic anemia is a condition where there would be deficiency in RBC production, and because of that there would be anemia. So, this is also hemolytic anemia refers to immature RBCs or components that can be destroyed in spleen regularly. So, this could fundamentally mean folic acid is not available for healthy cell membrane, giving rise to RBCs which quickly finish their cycle or very early, and there would be destruction. So, such kind of an anemia is also an indication that there is folic acid deficiency. So, what will happen? You have problems with DNA synthesis. Yes, obviously purine and pyrimidine synthesis is affected, and ineffective emetopoiesis. See, not only erythropoiesis, generally we look at erythropoiesis as RBC production being affected, but if you have a greater picture, you would also see pancytopenia. Pancytopenia means, pan means all, cytopenia is the normal blood cells. So, that includes RBCs as well as megakaryocytes, the platelets as well as immune cells. So, overall there is a problem in hematopoiesis. So, you see over there, there is one more condition, what we call it like cerebral folate deficiency syndrome. So, this is a neuropsychiatric syndrome that involves the blockade of folate transport across the blood brain barrier due to high affinity autoantibodies against membrane bound folate binding proteins on the choroid plexus. Okay, so, you see there this is although appears to be a rare condition where you have there is a blockade of the folate transport across the blood brain barrier, because even in the brain the fast growing cells, they need folic acid and it is circulated actually in a normal individual, but here you find there is an autoantibody. So, it is basically a autoimmune disease. Okay. So, this autoimmune antibodies, and especially they are high affinity antibodies, where they go and bind, they bind to this particular carrier protein, folate binding protein, and where it is present in the choroid plexus. So, you see that this happens very early, and this is a separate condition, and this picture is also a neurologic condition resulting from folic acid deficiency, and it can give rise to anencephaly. See, anencephaly is, if you actually literally translate, means no head, in other words no brain or proper or deprived brain formation. So, this could be a very serious condition in the newborn, and normally fetus will not survive much long. Even in the neonatal stage, the fetus might there would be a problem in the fetal development, and if at all it is born in the neonatal stage, the infant will not survive long. And you see over there the spina bifida, there would be I would say myelocele, protrusion of the spinal cord and the membranes. This is also a birth defect directly connected with folic acid deficiency. So, you see the neuronal tube development and maintenance and function is essentially integral part of pregnancy management. If the women is not taking sufficient amount of folic acid, so they run a very high risk of anencephaly children, I mean in the fetus, or with severe complications connected with folic acid deficiency, the spina bifida. So, you see there how essential folic acid would be, and how much emphasis is given on folic acid nutrition and metabolism, and how in every stage we need to supplement with the loss of folic acid through dietary sources. And as you see over there, this type of anemia is what we call it like macrocytic anemia. We already saw microcytic anemia. So, this one is macrocytic anemia. So, here you have a macrocytic anemia. Under macrocytic anemia you have the cells appear big. So, that is what you mean by macrocytic anemia, and macrocytic anemia can actually be categorized into two types, megaloblastic and non-megaloblastic. So, when you say megaloblastic, we are looking at the hematopoietic stem cell and how they give rise to, they are pluripotent in nature, how they give rise to monocytes, and you say the megaloblast, which is basically the matured form of what do you say, the immune cells. So, they go over there in the spleen, they reside and they undergo further maturation, and they become functional phagocytes. So, you see there whenever there is deficiency of folic acid and deficiency of vitamin B12, then people suffer from megaloblastic anemia. In either case, megaloblastic or non-megaloblastic, overall size of the cell would be a little bigger, and it is actually a kind of an anemia. So, you see there liver disease, alcohols and drugs can also have macrocytic anemia, or people would suffer from anemia, but this would be mostly non-megaloblastic in nature, because there would be a local effect, and when given consistently for a longer period of time can really give rise to complications. So, you see there this is a very interesting thing to look at, especially on the clinical point of view, to confirm folic acid deficiency and how this leads to megaloblastic anemia. Okay, so, you see there hematopoietic stem cells giving rise to myeloid progenitor. Myeloid progenitor is the key precursor what do you say lineage, where you get granulocytes, you get monocytes. Okay, so, you see there normally the myeloid progenitors, all the granulocytes, neutrophils, eosinophils and basophils are produced, and neutrophils are fundamentally called polymorphonucleocytes because they are multi-segmented. The nucleus is fragmented into 3 or 4 parts, and you see there instead of the routine 3-part fragmentation of a healthy neutrophil, you see multiple or hyperfragmentation noticed in the neutrophil. So, this is a very characteristic feature that can be attributed to folic acid deficiency. So, you see that, so we have already got this hint of pancytopenia, and now this directly reflects in the immune cell. So, it is not only the erythrocytes which have been affected, even the immune cell function is drastically affected. So, can we say that folic acid deficiency can actually have a threat of the normal innate immune response because neutrophils are affected? So, you see there would be clinical symptoms connected with that, and you look people with dyspnea. Dyspnea is like loss of breath. Because of anemic symptoms, RBC is immature and RBC is not capable of transporting oxygen as it should. So, they develop what do you say, tissue hypoxic condition and dizziness. Okay. Then there would be confusion and all the neurologic symptoms, headache, then exercise intolerance. With little exercise they feel so exhausted, they cannot exercise further. So, they are always in a state of being tired and pale. Okay. So, there could be even spontaneous infections and bleeding. So, these are all some of the symptoms clinically more noticeable to associate with folic acid deficiency. So, you see there plenty of fragmented neutrophils available, whereas the normal blood smear you find over there, you find the large oval RBCs. So, can you see over there large oval RBCs? RBCs are quite big macrocytic, whereas the normal RBC and the RBCs which are come under folic acid deficiency, the megaloblastic anemia. So, we are going to look at the overall picture. So, we are going to look at different aspects of deficiency that we have discussed, and with this we will wind up this session of folic acid. So, you see there how the tetrahydrofolate, which is the active form, and you see there the dihydrofolate reductase converts the tetrahydrofolate reductase, and as you see there how folic acid is closely related with vitamin B12 mechanism, especially in the methionine homocysteine synthase, contributing the biosynthesis of methionine from homocysteine. So, how this is coupled with B12, and how in case of B12 absence folic acid tries to what do you say reorient this particular mechanism. And then you have the drugs which inhibit like methotrexate and trimethoprim. Here you find over there how this drug, basically the anti-cancer drug, inhibits the formation of tetrahydrofolate, and this will directly have an impact on fast growing cells because they are deprived of the essential folic acid, without which purine and pyrimidine cannot be synthesized and eventually no DNA. Okay. So, you see that how this reaction like dump to DTMP, the thymidylate synthase based reactions, and you can also look at how this particular drug 5-fluorouracil inhibits this particular enzyme. See, this enzyme dihydrofolate reductase is inhibited by methotrexate and trimethoprim, whereas 5-fluorouracil inhibits thymidylate synthase. But thymidylate synthase from DUMP to DTMP is also coupled with tetrahydrofolate to dihydrofolate reductase. So, it is like very closely associated, and eventually all contributes in DNA synthesis. But you see there a very good collection of compounds which could inhibit this pathway and thereby directly have an impact on DNA synthesis. So, you see there the other end of it, the alcohol and other drugs having an impact. So, today we are going to wind up with a question: what are the deficiency conditions connected with folic acid, and what are the drugs which are anti-metabolites that could inhibit folic acid mechanism, and various kinds of disorders, especially disorders connected with blood cells and immune cells that result from folic acid deficiency. So, I repeat the question. So, the first question would be, what are the deficiency conditions associated with folic acid intake, and what are the neural tube conditions or deficiencies that can result because of folic acid deficiency, and then also a note on various diseases that can result by taking antimetabolites which could indirectly link with folic acid deficiency. So, thank you once again for your attention.